Hey, my name is Phil the Cruz. Welcome to Cruising with Phil. I welcome back guest, Mr. Jay Jordan from Central Toronto Wrestling, right?
Correct.
Yeah, welcome back. Hey, hi. Hey,
Thanks.
and you're in Barbados now, right?
I am, yeah. I've moved to Barbados, and actually, we're starting a club here called Central Barbados Wrestling
Oh,
on
really?
the
Okay.
south coast of Barbados. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so good.
yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a passion, right? And I was planning on moving here for some time during the pandemic. I started to spend quite a bit of time here. My family's from this part of the world,
Hmm.
from Guyana, and actually some of them from Barbados as well. So it was kind of a natural thing to do. I started getting involved in wrestling here and met the president of the Barbados Wrestling Association, who's a fellow by the name of Rollins and Lean. And Rollins and I became good friends over the past couple of years. And actually, we just sent a Bajan athlete up to Toronto to train over Christmas, which is great. She's a tough kid. I coached her back in May at the USA Beach Open, and she won the junior division. She's only 15 years old, so it's pretty impressive for her to be beating these 19 and 20-year-old kids on the national team. And yeah, she did so well. She really impressed me. So Rollins and I and her coach Yaima kept talking about her development. And given school here, they use the British system here, unlike in Canada. It sort of more reflects the American system these days, but it's very academically
Really?
challenging. So given the amount she already travels with the national team here, Christmas was the only time she could really afford academia wise to go to a 3-week training camp up in Canada. So we put her up at a member's apartment there in Toronto, and today's day two. She's already another level, I think. She's wrestling a lot of tough athletes and learning a lot. And she is a very very promising kid. And in fact, Rollins sent, he likes to keep everybody at the Barbados Olympic Association and others who help fund some of these things abreast of what's going on. And I did hear tell that a letter of update he sent out to all the stakeholders and interested parties hit the Prime Minister's desk, Mia Mottley's desk. She didn't respond, although the VP did. So it's kind of a big deal for Rebecca Williams to be up in Toronto training, and hoping she brings some of that technique she learns from all the Russians, Turks, Iranians up in Toronto and brings it down here to Barbados, right? So,
Let's go back a bit, Jay. When I first interviewed you, you started the company. How many years you started Central Toronto Wrestling? How many years have you started the company?
oh geez, it's been a decade now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's maybe over. Yeah, just about a decade. Yeah,
yeah, that's on the Danforth, right?
it is. Yeah,
Danforth in the Coxville area.
Danforth and Greenwood.
Greenwood, okay, yeah. And
Yeah,
last
right
time
in Greenwood.
our last interview you ended off where you had a new a trainer coming from Brazil, I think, coming over.
Yeah. We had a BJJ coach. We're actually hoping to bring him over permanently, but there's a lot of paperwork, and we're sort of engaged in that right now. So yeah, it's not exclusively wrestling; it's also BJJ. We find that the two sports blend quite well together, and it's easier to sort of fill the mat inventory if you've got two competitive, combative sports being coached out of the same facility. We're hoping that at first quarter this coming calendar year, we'll have another floor as well because we're starting to sort of max out our space and our mat inventory. So
What's
by
in
that
Toronto area?
point, sorry?
Is this in Toronto you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have a location here in Barbados, but still involved in shipping the mats down. And the landlord is currently, it's right across the street from one of the nicest beaches in Barbados, which is a lot of fun, but it also serves a function because as much as they have, freestyle and Greco here, beach wrestling is a big deal.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, yeah, because obviously there's so much beachfront property in Barbados. It's all public, and it sort of melds well with their sort of beach tourism mandate that the BOA and the Sports Association sort of have invested heavily in. So, and beach wrestling's cool. Like I started bringing kids down here. I think last year, a year and a bit ago, two Canadian athletes who did well, and then we brought a guy who's actually Pan Am champion from Cuba. He's on the Cuban national team, and I'm hoping to bring him here permanently to sort of coach the kids and all the senior athletes and everything in between. Technically, his name is Torreblanca, Yuriski Torreblanca, very good athlete, and actually his wife is of Bajan descent, so that's how they're sort of applying for immigration here, which is great.
You ever seen when I was in I don't know if you ever saw, you ever seen Turkish wrestling in Mongolian wrestling? When I was overseas in the military, I got a chance to
Yeah,
go watch an event just by coincidence. It was like an all day
yeah.
event, right? It was
Well,
big.
yeah, and the thing is, beach
You talk about outdoor wrestling, right? Like stand wrestling.
Yeah, well, when we brought Torreblanca down here, as much as he wrestles on the beach to train, he never competed on the beach, and he's
Oh,
Pan
okay.
Am freestyle champion. So he won the tournament. He beat a tough American in the final, actually, the guy who's USA beach national champion.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and no, but he loved it, and it's a great way to promote combative sport in the Caribbean because mats are very expensive and it's a significant barrier to entry, right? So this way, you make sure you rake the sand, and it's a very inexpensive way to access combative sport on the beaches, particularly wrestling.
Okay.
So it's becoming quite popular here, and we're hoping to sort of with the club to be able to say, look, we can do mat wrestling here. The weather allows it to go across the street to the beach, train there, and the reason UWW started sponsoring the beach stuff is because, as you mentioned, in Turkey and other places like India, that's where they learn how to wrestle is in the
Oh, yeah.
sand. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's quite it's meant as a developmental tool, and it works really well. And there's a huge beach circuit now that we're sending some athletes to. So and there's big sponsorship for it and stuff too. So
You ever watch?
it's really
You ever watch?
great.
You ever watch the Indian wrestling? The videos there.
Sorry?
You ever watch the Indian wrestlers? Or they train
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
When I was
Yeah.
over there and I was it's my second posting there. I was in just south of Bombay. There's an old school there. Actually, his son moved over here. Works at the Salvation Army now by coincidence. But back then, I got an opportunity to go and train with these guys. Right?
Yeah.
These guys are like warmongers. And then after you get this full body massage. You've never had a body massage like around a
Yeah.
any event. If you're not used to it, I mean, I'm used to it by a little bit, but they take your arm, they put your arm, like put your feet. It's like, what
Yeah.
the heck?
It's like a
I thought
workout.
massage is
Yeah.
like just a massage, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it's so cool. But they're like intense wrestlers, like a whole like generations of spammies. It's amazing. Yeah. I was gonna ask you when you did our interview back then, were you thinking of going to Barbados back then? Were you actually planning on it?
I think so. I think so. I might not have mentioned it, but yeah, I think so.
No.
It was quite a logistical operation to sort of pick up and move here, just even on a personal basis. I still have, my software business is back in Toronto, and as well as the wrestling club, obviously.
So your
But
two sons run it, right? Your two
it's
boys.
a lot of Zoom meetings.
Yeah, your
It's a
two
lot of
sons.
Zoom meetings.
You have
Yeah.
your two sons run the wrestling now in Toronto.
Yeah, yeah, and a daughter who she did wrestle a little bit. I think she's coming down here for Christmas actually.
Okay,
But
cool.
yeah, it's yeah, the whole family's been involved in the sport forever. So
That's cool. Was it hard to get like a working visa? What is it? A working visa or a training visa? Or what do
yeah,
you
I
call
have a work stamp that they so you have to apply for it, you have to pay a processing fee, and then basically you know they know they ask you a lot of questions, there's a lot of paperwork, but at the end of the day, they want more foreigners emigrating here, starting businesses and things like
it? Oh,
that,
okay.
right?
Does it give you any incentives or whatever?
You know what? Barbados is pretty tax friendly from a capital gains perspective. Personal income tax, it's better than Canada, but that's not saying much. Canada's pretty horrible, right?
I'm watching
So,
this video in Dubai videos. Come to Dubai.
yeah, yeah,
This guy's holding up all this
yeah.
cash. He's
No,
like,
it's not like that anymore. There are there are different sort of tax structures. What there is tax reciprocity between Barbados and Canada. So you remit in one jurisdiction and one you're resident in, the other one, there's an agreement, right? But that doesn't really impact me until some future point. Like my companies are still at home, I'm still paying Canadian tax. And
You're talking about the schools of the old, they call it the old British rule, right?
yeah, this is the thing. The education system here very much reflects the British education
Yeah.
system that exists elsewhere in the Caribbean, and they
And you
never
tell
let
the
go.
and
In
you tell
fact, if
the
anything,
I know the British because my nephews and nieces were living in Grenada, so they follow the British rule.
yeah,
So
yeah.
just explain briefly what the difference between our system compared to the British system. I think ours follows more the British than the Americans actually, right?
Yeah, I think ours many years ago they started making decisions that sort of aligned the system more to the American standards. But it's very clear that academically school is very challenging here. It's very much the three R's, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, and
Even the spelling, right? We follow the old British rules, spelling a different word like donut and check, compared to the
well,
Americans.
yeah, and I think the school generally is. I don't think the I don't want to say anything, get in trouble, but I think the woke politics of North America have yet to permeate the school system here. So it's they're very structured, and I think if you step out of line, Sir So and So or possibly Sister Mary Tabitha is going to let you know.
There are no sisters. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of spare the rod, spoil the child
Oh yeah.
concepts regarding
Well,
education.
it's funny you mentioned that. I was just had a conversation with a buddy there about discipline systems back in our days when I was like 70s the kid, 60s, sorry, 70s the kid, aging
Yeah.
myself here. I used to get these. I used to have the strap and the ears pulling and the belt. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
can't talk about that right now. You don't do that. That's a no
Well,
no.
listen, this is one of the things that like now they put you in jail, but I'm not so sure some of it's not a bad idea, right? Like it's kids need a firm hand, right? And not all of them. Some of them are quite compliant anyway, but
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons combative sports are great for kids because they learn to respect not just themselves, their opponent, the sport, their coach, the other coach. Like this is one of the things that regarding wrestling is it's lost on a lot of people. It reinforces sort of certain fundamental manners and respect. And there's a reason you shake hands at the end of the match, whether you win or you lose, and you shake the opposing coach's hand. And that's a really important lesson because it lets the kids know, and they do it at all levels, right? The international stuff, freestyle wrestling and Greco are even more, and it even enforce it even more than let's say the sort of folk style stuff in the States. It's you have to shake each other's hands and the opposing coach's hand, and it's for a lot of reasons, and it crosses cultural barriers, and it sort of imparts this deferential respect, which I think is just in our society these days we may be missing some of, right?
Well, even
Without
like
getting too much into it, I think we miss a bit of that, right?
in like martial arts, right? You always bow after the match.
Yeah,
That's
it's a very
yeah.
similar thing, but if anything, I think in Western culture, and frankly, viewed all over the world, it's 180 NSOs in the world for wrestling, which makes it, other than football, meaning soccer, probably one of the most competitive sports in the world. And to shake hands like that with your opponent, with your opponent's coach, is a very deferential sign of respect, right?
I
Whether
like
you
that.
want it
Yeah,
or
when I go watch
yeah.
wrestling on the Olympics, they all shake the
Yeah,
opponent's coach's
it's
hand.
an
It's
important
respect.
part of it, right? It's a
Yeah,
very intimate thing that sort of says, look, maybe I didn't win, or maybe I did win, and I still, it's the notion of being, humble in victory and you know, brave in defeat.
it's like in just like in Cape Breton when I was in the military. I used to get in fights with a lot of Cape Bretoners. Not a lot, but we get in fights, row and brow. Make a story.
Yeah,
Shouldn't be saying too much, but we
yeah,
fight, and then they get up and say, and then buddy will become buddy. Buddy, let's go for a drink, man. I'm done. Go get a drink after
yeah.
you're
Well,
done, the
but
guy. It's so funny,
yeah,
right?
this is these days it's kind of lost, but
Yeah, it's funny. You
it's a
fight, yeah.
fundamental part of being human. It's sort of making good and saying, look, like if I acted like I'm not going to use the word, but if I behaved in a way I shouldn't have, forgive me now, and
Yeah,
let's
it's
get
funny.
on with it, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a I think too often these days, and I'm not, I don't want to make sort of political commentary or sort of socio-political, comments, but I think it's a fundamental art form, not just the wrestling itself technically, but the notion of respecting your neighbor, your family, your community, and giving back by way of showing that you don't because you fought doesn't mean you hate the person,
Yeah,
right?
like guys in the yeah, like in the
Yeah,
military, I train with guys couldn't stand each other, like
yeah,
racism and all that. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's you put your when you got a job to do or something, your life's on the line. You got your buddy to rely on, no matter how much you hate the guy or he hates you or whatever, or she or he, whatever. But it's been proven fact that that's put aside. It's only an after effect or a thought. You just do the job and that's it.
yeah. And there's a common goal,
Yeah,
and
it
there's a
is.
community, and it's sort of like free speech, right? Like the concept, wrongly attributed to Voltaire, but was actually his biographer that said it, right? I may not agree with what you said, but I'll fight to the
You
death
read
for your
Voltaire?
right to say it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's sort of yeah, it's this sort of stuff these days isn't taught often enough these days, and it shows, right? It shows, in their behavior. And this is one thing that I love about being in Barbados is a lot of mutual, respect. Like I was at Oyston's, which is the big fish fry place. Yeah, it's also a fishing village on the south
Are
coast.
you trying to make us jealous now? Just being over there to sing this?
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I was there on a Saturday night, which isn't as busy as a Friday night. But this guy taking the orders was kind of rude to this woman,
Yeah.
and she, it's still people are still polite enough here that the woman actually sort of said, something. She said to the owner or someone, a manager, she said, this young man has clearly forgotten his manners, and I thought to myself. In Toronto, you never hear that, right? And listen, the guy was going to get browbeaten for it too by his boss because one thing you don't want to be called here is ill-mannered. Right? You just those are like fighting words, right? Like you don't say that unless you really mean it.
Oh, so
And
the boss heard about his boss heard that?
yeah, yeah, no, she went right to him and said, this
Oh,
this this boy here has just completely forgotten all his manners.
oh wow.
And no, and I think things like that are great because it keeps youth in check. It makes you understand that, hey, there is a pecking order here.
Mhm.
You should probably show some deference to your senior. And, there's a structure to society. It took us thousands of years to get here.
Yeah.
Deconstructing it overnight because of some ideologues is not a good plan, right?
What's the education? The British system is their schooling's different from ours too, right? Like their seasons of schooling is. Do they all wear uniforms?
It overlaps a lot, but some of it differs. Here, I think they get out a little earlier, and they
They don't have
go.
like
No, they
PA.
get out later and go back to school later. But that has to do with the heat. And the August and September are really hot, right?
Okay. They don't have like PA days like we have over here, like
I think, yeah, not like it. Yeah, they don't have the same number of staff days. I think, I have a lot of, I have to be careful because I'm friends with a lot of teachers at home. And listen, there are as many good ones as there are bad ones, but I'll tell you, yeah, this notion of education being about the workers in it, that doesn't exist here. It's definitely still about the kids here.
yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
that's good.
kind of good to see, right? Like they are the focus, benefiting them and
So you,
their
when you mentioned
learning
that,
or
you're talking
education.
about like strikes and rights and all that stuff with the workers.
Yeah, I don't think I don't. I mean, I'm sure unions exist here, but I don't think they're as powerful. Let's say. I think if in Canada we've gone too far in one direction, I think that would be one of those. You know, again, I don't want to make this a sort of socio-political commentary, but I know for a fact that a lot of our members, we have like 200 athletes now at the gym in Toronto, and we're targeting like 400 by the summer.
You got 200 now? How much when I did the interview? How much did you have back then? First interview with you?
I think we had, but I can't remember how many we had. It was certainly 100 fewer,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
But
good.
but in any event, at this stage, we're we're targeting 400 by the summer. And I will say that I know because I talk to the parents when I'm at home and I'm in the club. And I think it's the same thing here. A lot of the parents, yeah, sure, they come from cultures that are represented in Toronto, understand wrestling, but even more than that, even for a lot of Canadian parents, they like the discipline that combative sport teaches the kids. They like the fact that they're hungry when they go home and they're tired when they go to bed, and that they're not just playing Call of Duty in the basement and bouncing off the walls after eating too much sugar, right?
So it's like,
I mean,
thanks for helping me put my kid to bed early.
yeah, yeah. No, this is exactly it.
Yeah,
We all deserve a break. And when our kids are bouncing off the walls,
yeah.
whether it's hard to, it's hard to parent. And so I know that a lot of the parents really appreciate the sport that way, and the sort of values that it teaches and imparts on the kids, right? It
Also, I
teaches.
liked about but what you mentioned in your first interview. You also you cater to people's levels of income, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really do. It's, from, really beginners, complete beginners who've never wrestled, never done any combative sports, right up through to intermediate and, of course, high performance. And our coaching staff reflects that. And they're very cognizant of the levels of the athletes, right? Um, so it's, we're trying as much as possible to sort of we don't have a belt system per se, but we're trying to sort of implement, a more stringent structure around, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and sort of scheduling accordingly. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do because when you don't have a belt-driven system, we play with different concepts and we thought of, there's some, actually Rollins down here has come up with some good concepts. He's from the martial arts world. He's a
Okay.
kickboxing guy. But but yeah, there's some good ideas that hopefully we can implement at some point. But just having that structure around, okay, so these kids go to the beginner session, these ones go to intermediate. This kid's made it to the advanced level now. It's important stuff because we don't want kids to be demoralized. But the other thing is that in wrestling, it's rarely a more advanced athlete injuring a less developed one. It doesn't usually happen that way in wrestling. It's usually the really inexperienced kid just, you know, just being like, moving like
I went,
Frankenstein and being, just doing something really, unexpectedly silly, right? But
funny you mentioned I went to a judo competition with one of my friends, younger. He's like maybe 18 back then, this is years ago. And like you said about the but bigger than the so his final competition was this older guy. He was in his 40s and I guess he just joined judo. And obviously he's older and he's stronger. So he beat my friend just like that. Like he just pinned him like three times. Like I mean, it wasn't even a fair competition. I mean, the guy's
yeah,
got age on him, right? But that's the way the system worked, right? Like
yeah,
talking about
yeah.
misconception of weights and all weight classes and all. I was gonna ask you, like, what's the ever get any scenarios with different cultures like the Olympics, the last Olympics before, like say the Middle East, they had certain countries or cultures will not compete against each other because of the differences in the
Well, these days, it's certainly at sort of Olympic sponsored or events that are recognized by UWW. It's not tolerated. You typically get turfed from the tournament if you refuse. If you're you know a Palestinian who refuses to shake hands with an Israeli athlete or any of that
hmm,
sort of stuff, you get kicked out, right? So
yeah.
it's just I'm just using that as an example. Like you're not supposed to bring your socio-political
Yeah.
rivalry to the mat, and that again is something that I think is really important because sports meant to build bridges, right? Not burn them down, and it's that's a theme that I think is really it's not just healthy, it's fundamental, it's really important. Um, in particular, in places like Canada, like why bring these sort of old hatreds and rivalries into the room? We've had long-standing rules in our at our club that uh, there's a lot of Russian kids, there's a lot of Ukrainian kids, and you're just
Okay.
not allowed to talk about the war.
Yeah.
It's a policy, and for the most part, nobody in the gym is a particular fan of Putin. But even if they were, right, the odd time you get some kid is Russian but didn't really grow up there. The reason his parents went to Canada is because, for either opportunity and or probably some oftentimes reasons of oppression and trying to sort of flee that. So it's usually not difficult to convince people, but usually it's a kid who has the wrong idea and just has some sort of romantic visions of moving back to Russia one day, or But either way, those socio-political things, you can't bring them into the rooms. It's got to be about development. It's got to be friendships and building those friendships and those
Yeah.
experiences and
You guys could
traveling.
be you become
Yeah,
partners, like train together as a team, and doesn't matter your differences, right?
this is the thing. Like you can't, you're only as good as the best guy in the room.
Yeah.
And the thing is, everybody needs to get beat up to get better. So if you avoid wrestling this guy because either you think that he's not worthy, or that stuff just can't go on. It's anathema to the development concept, right?
Yeah, I ask you also mentioned the first one, you also teach kids with special needs, autism. I think
Yeah.
you said one of your kids has autism, I think. Can't remember now.
Yeah, my eldest actually is
Yeah.
autistic. Yeah, yeah, like very classically autistic. Yeah, yeah.
And so you train, do you get a lot of kids with special needs overseas in Barbados?
I wouldn't say we get a lot, but we get quite a few. Something you're usually higher functioning, but at the end of the day, my son, I've got a stepson that coaches in the gym as well. But my middle kid, who's my youngest son, he coaches a lot of those kids with special needs because his older brother, he's grown up with him his entire life. He understands some of the challenges and how they sort of convey. How to communicate, right? It's not, sure, it's verbal, but it's also like, it's about being patient, right? And, but listen, autistic kids need discipline as much as non-autistic kids do.
Right.
It's,
It's true, yeah.
to just, yeah,
My niece's son, my grandnephew, they just got tested for autism, right? So we had a suspicion that because they had all the some of the examples, the way he was working, the
yeah,
way so when he comes over here, he doesn't discipline at all. Like I'm the one that disciplines him. She gets
yeah.
mad at me. I said, "You got discipline. It doesn't matter if he has autism or not. That's why he's a kid.
Yeah.
He's
No,
not.
that's right. They
Yeah,
all need discipline.
yeah, yeah.
You can't feel sorry for them and
No, no, I
then
told you.
say, "Oh,
She's got
I'm not going to discipline." And it's not
yeah.
a disease, right? Like this is
No,
the
no,
thing.
no. And the problem she
Yeah,
picks him up for every little thing, right? It's probably
yeah,
very clingy. He's three and a half now, but he's always clingy. When he comes over here, he likes to like explore because it's a big
yeah,
apartment, and
yeah,
we have
yeah,
a lot of like lights, like
yeah,
the clocks with the neon lights. He loves that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah,
last Christmas, I got him a little fire truck that had the neon lights. You press the buttons
yeah,
and all
yeah,
that. So he loves that. Yeah, yeah, things like that. But yeah, he's like you said, you got to just doesn't matter what age you got to discipline. When he's over here, I discipline. I said don't because he pulls things down, it's gonna fall on him, right? And she gets
yeah.
all
No,
mad.
that's key, right? And there's an old saying, if God doesn't bless you with children, He'll curse you with nieces and nephews. And then, and like I really believe in
I'm gonna use
that.
that next time I get mad at him.
Yeah, it takes a family, it takes a village, right,
Yeah,
to raise these kids. And I think too often these days we're letting the kids be, listen, I'm a technology guy. I've been involved in software development for 30 years. I love technology, but we can't let it raise our children, right? They need to
no,
socialize. They need to understand how to cooperate with other people, how to compromise. These types of things. It's just like, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but a lawyer of mine, who's also a very close friend, said to me the other day, I'm leading this client and teaching this client the art of the possible. She's kind of frustrated with him. But the truth is, that's a lot of what politics is. It's a lot of what business is. It's a lot of what sport is. You have to sort of, believe in and learn, if you don't know it, the art of the possible.
is
And
is your the first school in Barbados to open up a wrestling school?
it opens mid-January. Like we have had some kids down here training with. There's another couple clubs, and I've coached a bit at those clubs and on the beach, as well as at the Barbados Open. But our actual club is opening mid-January,
Okay.
and yeah, and
Have you
it's
had
here on the
any
South Coast.
any from the local citizens? Have any feedback or any like response that you're going to be opening up in January?
Yeah, I did some sort of test marketing on Facebook with some ad campaigns. It was a good response. Barbados sort of reminds me in some ways, at least socioeconomically, of Canada like 40 years ago. There's a very functional economy. You go buy groceries, there's a kid packing your bag and pushing your cart out
Oh
your
yeah,
car.
I remember that. Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
good.
you go to the gas station, there's a kid pumping your gas, right?
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's quite it is a very functional economy. Um, and people are getting their kids into lots of different, technical sports, and the country's quite supportive. If they lack anything, it's because the island is so small and there's only 260,000 people here. So, if you're the national champion, how do you get better? You got to get off the island, right? You got like, how do
Well,
you get?
there's always Trinidad, right? And there's a
But yeah, well, this is the thing. Like cricket is huge here, and soccer, football, right? But with smaller sports like wrestling, you really have to get them into Canada, to the U.S. to get that sort of breadth and depth of competition experience. So Rollins is pretty good about setting up some structures to do that, billeting athletes with families and giving them competition opportunities off the island. Because you know what you don't want to do is you say, "Oh, this kid's on the national team. Like, let's drop them in at senior worlds now." Like they need a breadth of competitive experience, right? Like you can't just throw them to the wolves, right?
Yeah. Have you had any interest like that like people want to send their kids internationally over to your school, like even hearing about it? Like
I think it's funny because they didn't really market it towards kids, but that's my intention. So I think I got a lot of would-be MMA athletes and BJJ athletes and grapplers who want to learn how to wrestle, because wrestling, like here, and like at home and other places, um, tends to be the skill set in shortest supply and highest demand for MMA, right?
mhm.
So, but I do want to market more to kids because that's really the going to be the focus. I'm certainly giving the senior athletes an opportunity to train and develop, and the youth age groups. But the kids are really, from a developmental perspective, it's a long-term investment, right? You need them really young in order to be competitive in a landscape internationally that is 180 NSOs. You need to start very young.
Very young, yeah.
And young. Like the Americans get away with they do start young. The Russians tend to use like sort of 10 years old. But what people miss about their development system is they have those kids in dance and high level gymnastics before they stream them into combatives or whatever else, right? So they maybe haven't competed at a combative, but they already have all the skill sets, all the body awareness, agility sort of things from dance and gymnastics. We tend to forget that in this hemisphere. We just go, oh, well, kid's pretty fast. I'm gonna put him in, athletics. Like,
I just had this,
okay,
so I just had a scenario. Your scenario. You're at the gym there, and the mat all these kids. And some new member starts prancing around. You're like, "Buddy, what do you think you're doing? You're settle down.
yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like,
Stop the flamingo dancing. See that way, yeah."
yeah. Well, people don't realize, but all wrestlers can dance. It's a funny thing. They may have no rhythm, but they can dance. It's sort of like a combative sport thing. It has to do with footwork, right? Like if you
I'll tell it to
um
my, I'll tell it to my buddy next time we go dance. My buddy, some of my friends have a rhythm, right? It's like, hey, next time you
yeah.
go play, do your wrestling. Next time you go dance with your girlfriend, instead of just you can't dance, just wrestling with on the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. It's a funny thing, but honestly, there's so much gymnastics and combative sport, like even during a warm up to, cool down. They're doing gymnastics all the time. And it's the same thing with dance. Like people tend to think of it as just, oh, that's that, and this is this. No, they're very interrelated because your footwork, how quickly you can move your feet laterally, change, people don't realize like agility literally is defined by quickness of directional change, right?
Yeah.
So enhancing those skills, building them requires exactly like in gymnastics. We set up these obstacle courses for kids too, and we time them. And we say, okay, so beat your score now, right? Like every time you try and improve around this obstacle course. And it's amazing how like as much as you can improve them, if you take 50 kids and you start doing some of these things, like, okay, say sprint from a lying down, face down position, get up and sprint across the length of the mat. I'll almost guarantee you that the best two or three, the first time you do it, will be the same two or three a month from now, 2 months from now. So that's proof that there's some genetics related, but it's also how they're listening, it's how they learn, it's how there's certain things you can do to improve it. But the one thing I really like about wrestling is that no matter how much of a freakish athlete you are, if you stop working hard, the people who are working hard are going to beat you. Right? And that is just, it is like an axiom in combative sport generally, but I think in wrestling very specifically because it's so competitive, right?
Yeah. What's your oldest person come to your gym? Like, you have anybody in their
Oh no,
seniors?
we have people in their 40s who
Oh
still
yeah.
wrestle.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes they're insane. Like I'll ask them why,
Well,
because honestly, at that point,
yeah,
it's one
you
of
said
those things.
earlier. Yeah, you said earlier
Yeah,
you
like that's one of
train young
those
guys.
things that
Yeah.
I think if you're BJJ is good for those guys. You can do that into your 80s. It's great sport.
Yeah.
We see a lot of transition between wrestling and BJJ. It's very complementary. But yeah, I always wondered with the guys who are still, a friend of mine at home won World Seniors at like I think he was no World World Masters,
Oh
and
yeah.
I think he was in like Turkey that year. So and this guy, man, I was like, how old that guy is? Like I think I'm surprised he didn't walk out to the mat with a walker. Like it's a little bit neurotic to still wrestle. It's if only because there's a lot of dynamic motion, right?
Yeah.
Like whereas BJJ, you're getting a good workout and you're still moving around. Like I think it's more wise for people of our vintage to be
Yeah.
looking towards BJJ.
Hey,
Right?
Jay, do you want to go into the next session? It's just about the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just cut off here. We'll continue. I
Okay.
got a question about
Sure.
the next question. So I'll just say back in 5 minutes.